welcome everybody. My name is Michelle. I am the Ottawa RSTP trainer, and I will be the one facilitating today's session. Today's session will be focusing on post-arrival requirements, and this is entirely on everything that has to do with after the individuals, the newcomers have arrived in Canada. And before we get started, we'll do a land acknowledgement. I am speaking with you today from the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, whose people hold historical relationships with the land and water to this day. As groups that work with refugees, we are grateful for the treaties of peace and friendship and recognize our responsibility to work towards reconciliation. Here is our agenda for today. And as you can see, there's quite a bit. It's quite packed. So we'll first talk about pre-arrival verification. So what exactly happens before the newcomers arrive, before the refugees arrive? What type of verifications are required at that point? We'll touch on settlement requirements. And this would be in regards to what exactly is the group responsible for when it comes to resettling the newcomer. We'll touch on financial requirements, good practices for settlement. Just a brief note, when it comes to financial requirements, we won't go too into details on the different calculations. Typically, we have a whole separate presentation, a whole separate workshop on financial requirements. So I'll briefly touch on that today, just to kind of touch on exactly what are the requirements when it comes to post-arrival. And we'll then touch on what are the good practices for settlement. What are things to keep away from? What are things to keep in mind as you're going throughout the sponsorship period? And we'll also touch on post-arrival assurance activities. So for those that are not familiar with RSTP, RSTP is the Refugee Sponsorship Training Program. And in terms of what we do, we provide information, we provide training, we provide resources for all groups. So either groups of 5, sponsorship agreement holders, constituent groups, co-sponsors, community sponsors, all those sponsorship groups can reach out to us for any information, any training, or any resource that they may be looking for. Our program, the Refugee Sponsorship Training Program, it is a national program. So there is a local trainer in almost every area except for Quebec. Quebec has their own private sponsorship of refugee program. So it's a little bit different than the rest of the other provinces. So they have their own program. So RSTP is not in Quebec. But other provinces, there is typically a local trainer in that region. We're also able to provide updates that come from IRCC. We have newsletters that kind of covers everything that is new within the program, whether it's training sessions, whether it's new information, that is typically shared through that newsletter. We're able to respond to inquiries either by phone or by email. You can contact us. We'll be more than happy to assist you. We have a helpline. There is a trainer on the other side. So it is not going to just be a machine that's responding to your phone call. There is typically someone on the other side that is able to pick up the call, is able to answer any of the questions that you may have. That number is available if you would like to reach out anytime from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We also have online resources on our website. Any trainings, any resources that we have is typically shared on our Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and on YouTube. We have e-training, so that means we also have online courses that you're also able to join. If you are brand new to the program, feel free to take our online courses. It is self-paced, so you can go at your pace while you're learning. We also offer workshops. They can be either online or in person. They're offered by different trainers in their local areas, and they also cover different topics. If there is a specific topic you would like training on, you can reach out to your local trainer. We also have monthly webinars, and it's a series of webinars that we do conduct the same webinar in every single month. So if you miss, let's say, one session this month, you would have the chance to also follow with the next month. And again, same thing as the workshops, it touches on different topics. And one of the other things that we do as RSTP trainers is application review. So let's say you're working on an application and you're not exactly sure if it's ready to be submitted, or maybe it's your very first application. If you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to us. We'll be able to review the application package before you do go ahead and submit. So that pretty much gives you an overview of what exactly we do. So at any point in time, reach out to us and we'll be more than happy to help you with any questions, any resource that you are looking for. So the first item in the agenda was pre-arrival verification. So we're going to touch on what exactly this is. Pre-arrival verification is when IRCC requests updated settlement and funding information from your sponsorship group. So it is random selection. It is not with every single case. And it's only for sponsorships as of January this year, January 2024. So that means for any applications before January 2024, you will now receive a pre-arrival verification. But if you submitted a case as of January 1st, 2024, and ongoing for any of those applications, IRCC can reach out to you before the refugee arrives and ask for updated information. So let's say you've been waiting for the refugee to arrive. Once they have completed the medical screening overseas, IRCC will reach out to the group that's here in Canada, the sponsorship group, and ask them for updated information on the settlement plan that was when the application was submitted and the funding. Because during that waiting period, anything can change. Maybe the refugee got married, maybe there is now a newborn, or maybe there is a separation. Anything can change. So you may need to update the settlement plan. You may need to update the funding. And typically when IRCC reaches out to you, they will give you 30 days to respond to the request. So you'll have time to respond to the request. You'll have time to verify and get everything together before you do go ahead and submit the verification. So they just want to verify that 100% of the funds are available, that you're still meeting the residency requirements, and the settlement plan is updated. So residency requirements is just ensuring that the sponsorship group is still living where the newcomer will come and resettle. And then once everything is final, if everything is good to go, that's where you will then receive a notice of arrival. It's typically called a NAT, so a notice of arrival transmission email. And you will receive that from IRCC, just letting you know that the refugee has a confirmed travel itinerary, so the exact date that they'll be traveling and the arrival date, the arrival time, all of that information will then be sent to you. Okay, so that's one of the new things that happened this year. It was the pre-arrival verification. So we're going to first touch on what are the PSR settlement requirements. And PSR stands for Private Sponsorship of Refugees. One thing to keep in mind is that each settlement plan must address the unique needs of the principal applicant and their dependents. The settlement plan that you have for a family of 2 is a different settlement plan that you would have from a family of 6. So each settlement plan has to address the unique needs of the principal applicant and their dependents. So that means language, age, gender, interests, skills, health needs, all of that needs to be addressed in the settlement plan. You would include the settlement needs of every refugee applicant, even the ones that are not coming at the same time. So when you're filling out the settlement plan, you'll also need to realize that it needs to include even the family members that are not coming at the same time as the principal applicant. Because at any point in time, they may come at a later time under 1-year window. So as you're drafting the settlement plan, you'll just ensure to meet these 2 criteria. One other reminder is that there are specific obligations, consents, and declarations that you have signed on when you filled out the sponsorship undertaking form. So when it comes to the reception, for example, you are signing on saying that we'll meet the refugee upon arrival. That is one of the settlement requirements. So once the refugee arrives, you will meet them upon arrival in the expected community of settlement. You'll provide them with suitable accommodation. You'll provide them with food, clothing, local transportation. You'll also assist the refugees to learn an official language, so that's either English or French, and also provide them with any employment services that is needed. You'll provide them with the one-time startup support and the ongoing monthly income support. And as a group, you're assuming liability with all the other signatories. So if you're a group of 5, as you're signing this on, you and the other group of 5 are assuming liability ensuring that you will meet all of these criteria. You'll meet all these responsibilities for up to 12 months, counting from the date of arrival. So from the date that the refugee lands in Canada. So as we just mentioned, you'll touch on housing, you'll touch on the settlement agency support in your plan, and you'll also touch on health and mental health. So that's doctor, dentist, or any other health they may need, and a contingency plan. So what if the family separates? What if there is a newborn? What if there is someone that's now newly married? All of those will be touched on a settlement plan, especially when it comes to the pre-arrival verification that we just talked about before. When it comes to updating it, you will need to touch on all of this information. We'll also touch on assurance, the post-arrival assurance, towards the very end of this session today. As a group of 5, as a community sponsor, as a constitutional group, or a sponsorship agreement holder, whichever sponsorship group that you may be, these are your sponsors' obligations. You'll provide the cost of food, the cost of rent, the cost of the household utilities, and every other day-to-day living expenses. You'll provide them with clothing, furniture, and other household goods. You'll also locate interpreters, that is, if they are speaking a different language, in order to assist them with navigating the system. So you'll also assist in selecting family physician and a dentist. You'll help them with applying for provincial health care. You'll enroll children in school, and if there are any adults needing language training, you also assist in enrolling them in language training. You'll introduce the newcomers to people with similar personal interests, and you'll also provide them with orientation on everyday activities. So that is with either banking services, transportation, where they can do their grocery shopping, and you'll assist them in the search of employment. So if they come in already fluent in English, already fluent in French, whichever that it may be, and they're just ready to jump into the workforce, you would also assist them with searching for employment. This is not the extensive list. It's not every single thing that will be taken care of that is checked off within the settlement plan, within the settlement requirements. There may be more. As we mentioned, when you're drafting that settlement plan, it is unique to every refugee. So there may be things that you may need to add or remove depending on the refugee that you're sponsoring. So that was a brief overview of the settlement requirements, and we're now going to touch on financial requirements. This is a table that you may have seen when you were filling out the application forms. So it's a sponsorship cost table. For example, for a family of 4, IOCC may need to see $28,700 in the application in order for them to approve the application. And as you can see, there are links as to where exactly to find that, and I'll share that with you. When it comes to post-arrival, when it comes to the refugees now being here in Canada, you would use the RAP rates, the Resettlement Assistance Program rates. So the RAP rates, this is a contribution program through which the Government of Canada provides assistance for government-assisted refugees to establish themselves in their new home. So it is the same amount, it's the same program that is then also used for private sponsorship of refugees when it comes to calculating the rates needed for support when you are supporting the newcomers financially. So when the refugee now arrives in Canada, you would give them the income, the monthly support, according to the RAP rates in that province. You're able to go above those rates, but you're not able to go under those rates. So this is the least amount required to be provided to the newcomers once they arrive. I will just show you on our website, rstp.ca, under responsibilities, you will see here it says RAP rates, Resettlement Assistance Program rates. If you click on that, it will take you to this page. And as you can see, there is a startup cost, and then there's provincial rates here. The startup cost is the same in every province. So as you can see, these rates change. They were updated as of September 1st, 2024. The last time they were updated was January 2022. So the startup costs, both the old and the new, are still on the website, just to kind of give you an idea. So the startup cost, the new one here, if I click on that, the one that was updated as of September 2024, it automatically takes me to that document. So it shows me exactly, let's see if I can zoom in, shows me exactly what the costs are, the startup costs. So startup costs, it is a one-time check that is provided to the newcomer once they arrive, okay? So I won't go too into details on financials, so we can actually spend quite some time here. But I do have another session that I typically cover, where it typically covers the financial calculations and so on. So when it comes to startup costs, this is a one-time check they will receive, and that check is a combination of a staple allowance. So this is what's provided. Staple allowance is what is provided to set up the household. So that's basic pantry food or cleaning supplies. All of that falls under staple allowance. There is basic and winter clothing, basic needs, so basic household needs. So that's either window coverings or kitchen utensils that would fall under household needs. There's also the furniture allowance and linens and utility installation. So they're all broken down. And as you can see, it also depends on the family size. So a family of one, a family of two, family of three. And you'll just need to add up these amounts, and that would give you the total of the startup costs, the total of what is the first check that they would receive as soon as they arrive. Okay, so that is the same in every province. And then the ones where you see that there is the name of the province next to them, those are the RAP rates. And we'll take a look at, let's take a look at BC here, the new one. So September 2024. For the RAP rates for BC, as you can see, so basic needs allowance and shelter allowance and communication. So this is the basic amount that they will be receiving every single month when it comes to just meeting their basic needs. And as I mentioned, this is the minimum. You can go above these amounts, but you cannot go below these. It needs to still meet the requirement. So you can still go above these amounts, and that's perfectly fine. And as you can see, it also is divided by family size. If there is someone that is either pregnant or there is a newborn, these are the allowances. And it also tells you the frequency, if it's monthly or if it's one time. And on the second page, if there is a senior, so in BC, it means everyone that's 65 or older. These are the amounts that they will be receiving. So as you can see, it's very different in each province. But I strongly recommend you, as you're doing the calculations, just go ahead, take a look at these amounts. And you can either use these two documents or you can simply go and use the calculator. We do have also the minimum financial support calculator. This is a great tool when it comes to calculating the financial requirements once the refugee is here in Canada. And I'll just show you where you can find that calculator, rstp.ca, responsibilities, minimum financial support calculator. If I click on that, automatically takes me to the calculator. I just need to do a little bit of scrolling at the bottom. Community of Settlement, Ontario, and we'll choose Ottawa. Let's say they now arrive. So the date of expected arrival, let's say they arrived this year in 2024 of October 1st. Family size, it's a family of 4. Adults will say it's a couple. That means there's 2 children. No one is pregnant. No one has a special diet. And they haven't started working yet, so we'll put a 0 there. And for the children, we'll say that they're each 11 and 16. Calculate. You can see the monthly breakdown that's right here. So as of October 1st, this is what they will be receiving up until September 2025. And this is the last one they would receive. I'm not going to go in detail at the top here because that could take us some time, but this is just mainly what I wanted to show you here. Okay. So this calculator combines the 2 documents that I just showed you. It combines the startup cost and the RAP rates. All of that is included in the calculator. So if you feel a little bit more comfortable, you can also just take a look at the calculator instead of the 2 documents that I mentioned. So what are some good practices to keep in mind? What are some things to remember while you're going through the settlement period? So through that 1-year period, there is a document. It's called a post-arrival requirements document from IRCC. It was updated as of October last year, so October 2023. It is a great document. It is a great resource. It has so much in it. It has also even links for information that you may look for. It has different case scenarios. For example, let's say you are resettling a family and during that sponsorship period, there's a separation. What do you do? Or let's say now the children are older by the time they arrive here and they want to live in their own. What do you do in that case? How do you calculate that? How do you provide them with settlement support? All of that is included in this document. I can share that resource with you if you would like, but all of that is included in this document. It covers settlement support requirements, financial support requirements, self-destination, and secondary migration. So self-destination is, let's say you have sponsored someone and they're arriving in Canada. However, they have a layover in Toronto and they were to arrive in BC. Once they come in that layover in Toronto, let's say they do not catch the next flight to go to BC, they decide to remain in Toronto and resettle in Toronto. That is called a self-destination. Secondary migration is when the newcomer arrives, they resettle in the community of settlement. So they resettle where their sponsors are. However, on their third or fourth month in Canada, they decide they want to move somewhere else. Maybe it's to get closer to family, or maybe they were able to get another employment opportunity. Whatever the reason may be, they decide they want to move and they go ahead and move. That is what you would consider a secondary migration. So case scenarios, even or questions about self-destination or secondary migration are also included in this document. It also touches on another branch of the PSR program, which is Joint Assistance Sponsorship. And there is the Rainbow Refugee Assistance Partnership, and there's the Post-Arrival Monitoring and Assurance, which we'll be touching on at the very end of the session today. But as you can see, it is a document that has a lot of information, so I would strongly recommend to take a look at that. Some things to keep in mind as to what not to do during the sponsorship period. When you are sponsoring someone, during their first year of sponsorship, you would avoid having them apply for social assistance. Privately sponsored newcomers cannot access social assistance. They cannot access welfare during their settlement year. And this is a topic that you would need to discuss and clarify with the newcomers. And as sponsors, you also need to be aware that you cannot encourage them to apply for social assistance during that first year, because if they do, sponsors will be required to pay back any amounts received by the sponsored persons. So make sure you inform them that they're not eligible to apply during their first year. In Ontario, however, there is an exception. In Ontario, for newcomers who qualify under the Ontario Disability Support Program, so ODSP is how it's known. So that Ontario Disability Support Program, newcomers are able to apply for that within their first year. So that is the only exception that I'm aware of so far. When it comes to subsidized housing programs, subsidized housing, they cannot take hold of this within their first year, as sponsors are responsible to provide housing to them for 12 months. However, for subsidized housing programs, currently there is a wait time of, I believe, more than 5 years in certain provinces. So if you would like to apply just to get them on the waiting list, but they'll have access to it after the 12 months, that's perfectly okay. But unfortunately, if they apply and they get to it within their first year, they will not be able to gain access to it. So they'll have to wait until after their first year. One other recommendation of what not to do during their sponsorship period. So sponsors shouldn't cease financial support prematurely. So that means when the newcomer starts working, you do not cease financial support right away until they're self-sufficient and it meets the financial requirement. Sponsors should know they should continue to provide monthly financial support until they can prove the income that the newcomers are now receiving is a lot higher. So there's a certain percentage than what sponsors are providing them. And in order to know this, simply use the calculator, or you can also reach out to us. We'll be able to calculate with you. So we just talked on what not to do. Now let's talk about what you should do or what you should keep in mind. One of the good practices. We highly strongly recommend working with a settlement agency. So if you're in Ontario, in Ottawa, one of the settlement agencies could be maybe CISO or CCI. So settlement agencies are in different regions. They're in different cities, different provinces. We strongly recommend working with the settlement agencies. These are organizations that are funded by IRCC, and they provide settlement services to all newcomers to Canada. So anyone that's a new permanent resident, they're able to provide you with assistance. That also includes refugees that are sponsored under this program. And refugees that are sponsored under this program, as soon as they land in Canada, they become PR, they become permanent residents. So they have access to these services. They have access to settlement agency services. So there is an expectation that sponsors will connect connect the newcomers with the settlement agency as soon as possible after their arrival. So I would recommend to start doing a little bit of research if you haven't done. So just start doing a little bit of research of local settlement agencies in your area that could meet the settlement needs of the family you're sponsoring. So these services are complementary. They're not replacing you as sponsors. So as a settlement agency and as a sponsor, you would work together for the best interests of the sponsored newcomer. So it's a partnership of support. It is not one person doing more than the other. You're working together for the best interest of the sponsored newcomer. One way to look at it is, let's say, for language assessment. Maybe you as a sponsor, you're aware that a settlement need is that the newcomer needs to attend language courses. You can connect them with the settlement agency. The settlement agency can do a language assessment and they can provide them with that language training that's needed. So you're working in partnerships. So that's very much how you would be working with the settlement agency. It's not that they're completely taking over, but they're working with you. If you have never heard of a settlement agency or you don't know exactly where to go to look for one, on this website, put in your postal code or your city or address. You can select the service you're looking for, and it will bring up different settlement agencies in your region. Throughout the entire sponsorship period, your role is to facilitate and to empower. So you're supporting the newcomers, you're equipping them to ensure that they're able to make their own decisions. You may not always agree with their decisions or how they allocate, let's say, for example, their financial. But as a sponsor, you're just helping them find out as much as possible for them to at least feel like they have some sort of control over their environment and to attain their aspirations. So you're just, as a sponsor, your role is just to facilitate and to empower the newcomer. And just a few reminders, no one is a refugee by choice. And I think most of you already are aware of this. No one is a refugee by choice. It is simply of something that happened, whatever issue that it may be, in their country that causes them to flee their origin country. And in many cases, it was not a choice for refugees to select Canada or to come to Canada. Unlike independent immigrants are able to choose and pick whichever country they would like to go to. Refugees were also able to take care of their families in their home countries and in the countries of asylum. So this is why we say that as a sponsor, you're only equipping them, you're facilitating, you're empowering them. Few things to keep in mind as you're also helping them through the sponsorship period is that they may have experienced serious loss, or they may have witnessed terrible crime, or they may be survivors of torture. So that is why we'll also recommend connecting with the settlement agency because they also may have counselors that can also assist with any newcomer they may have undergone any of this. We're going to touch on also managing expectations. A few things to keep in mind as you're going through the sponsorship period is that you may have expectations as a sponsor, and the newcomer also would have expectations. So as you're learning your role as a sponsor, you would also need to also adjust your expectations to ensure that they're not extremely high or they're not expectations that can be unmet. So a few things to think of, to consider that would help you frame your expectations. And this can be done individually. It can be done just you as a person as part of the sponsorship group, or it could also be done with the rest of the group together. And we have a great document, which I'll share with you again, as I mentioned, to start seeing whether your expectations are realistic, because it is quite important to ensure that expectations are realistic, because it is then easy to experience success. Because on the other hand, when these expectations are too high or they're too rigid, it could lead to disappointment. So you always want to ensure that the expectations that you have as an individual, the expectations that you have as a sponsorship group are expectations that are realistic. And some questions to help you guide your thought process, some questions to help you guide your group are, what is exactly the reason as to why you're involved in refugee sponsorship? What enticed you to get started with refugee sponsorship? What do you hope to get out of the sponsorship? What hopes do you have for the refugee you have sponsored? Because it's very natural for us to have our hopes for the refugees we're sponsored. Maybe there's a language barrier. So let's say our hope would be that they would feel comfortable with the language with the English language. Or maybe it may be that they're completely fluent, and your hope is that once they arrive, they would have joined the workforce. So it could really depend on exactly what your hope is, but it is very natural to have hopes for the refugee that you've sponsored. Your group also may have their own hopes. So you also have to see, does your group share these same hopes? And will these hopes that you have as an individual, that you have as a sponsorship group, do they match with the expectations? Do they match with the hopes of the sponsored refugee? And as you're assessing this expectation, you also have to ask yourself, are you being fair? Are you being realistic? And one thing to keep in mind, I think, as you're drafting the settlement plan, as you're going through the settlement requirements, they are going to be different from one family to the other. So you may have expectation for one family, but they may be different for another family. So you'll have to make sure that the expectations that you have for one family are not the same across the board for everyone that you're sponsoring, because in that case, that it may not be fair, it may not be realistic, because they're all unique, they're all different. And another good question to ask yourself is, how would you feel if your hopes for the sponsored refugees do not materialize? What happens in that case? So if sponsors do whatever they can to manage expectations early on, the road leading to a sponsorship breakdown can be avoided altogether. The road leading to misunderstandings, to conflict, to ineffective communication, that could be avoided as long as the expectations are managed, as long as the expectations are realistic. So what exactly can we do? What can we do about it? What is the key? So with managing unrealistic expectation, you would first need to understand what is the source of it. The source of most of these unrealistic expectation is rumors. There may be a Canadian myth. It may be due to media. It may be due to a lack of information, false information, or maybe there's a confusion regarding the program. There's so many different pathways. So the refugee may not understand exactly which program they're sponsored. So there may be confusion with that because the requirements are different also. If there's a lack of communication, a lack of pre-departure orientation, that could also be a source of an unrealistic expectation. And this could lead to entitlement. It could lead to rights. It could lead to quality or quantity of support. The quality of life in Canada and the opportunities in Canada could also be affected. This can result in feeling neglected. The newcomer may feel neglected. They may feel disadvantaged. They may feel wronged, disappointment. It really depends on what the source was. And this can lead to misunderstandings. It can lead to ineffective communication. It can lead to sponsorship breakdown. For example, someone is being sponsored under a family program, depending on whichever route they go, you are responsible as a sponsor, up to 10 years. Private sponsorship or refugee program, when you're being sponsored on this, it is for 12 months that sponsors are responsible. So that's already a major difference. So if already there's a confusion regarding the program, the newcomer could be led to believe that the sponsor is required to support them for 10 years, not understanding that it's a different program. Then they may feel wronged, they may feel disappointed, they may feel frustration or anger. And this could lead to interpersonal conflict simply because there was a confusion regarding the program. So this is why we highly recommend communication. Open communication between the sponsors and the family members of the refugees, between the sponsors and the refugees, between also the sponsorship group. There should also be communication. So between every single party or person that's involved in that sponsorship, there should be communication. And it should start before the arrival of the newcomer, during their arrival, and up to the very end of the sponsorship period also, just to avoid unmet expectations. So this is why we recommend the orientation. There is a lot of value. It helps newcomers make sense of the new community and country they settle into. So when newcomers receive good orientation information, it helps them settle into their communities a lot faster and more easily. So as sponsors, one of your responsibilities is to provide orientation, particularly to the local community in which the newcomer will be resettling. But before they arrive in Canada, so before they travel, before they take their flight, refugees that are being resettled in Canada usually arrive with some sort of orientation that they received abroad, that they received in the country of asylum. and it is directed by IOM. And IOM stands for the International Organization for Migration. So they will be given a participant workbook. And there is a link also if you would like to know more about it. And it is an orientation that covers so many different topics. They spend a number of hours learning about travel preparation, the initial settlement, and life in Canada. So that includes services when it comes to housing, health, education, employment, budgeting and transportation, and so on. They do also touch on Indigenous peoples in Canada, diverse sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, the linguistic duality of Canada. So it touches on quite a lot. So they already come with some information, quite some orientation before they arrive. But settlement agencies also provide orientation programs. So you can connect them to a settlement agency. They can give them that orientation program. And also as sponsors, you'll also provide them with orientation as to where are the grocery stores in the area, where they could catch the bus, having access to any resources in the community. So just giving them basic orientation at the very beginning once they arrive to get them feeling comfortable, to get them feeling a little bit more settled in their new community. So if you're looking, trying to think exactly what to include, here's just some ideas. You could include budgeting, you could include banking, how to file taxes, grocery shopping, local daily patterns, so the work day or the work week, that could vary in each country, transportation and store hours. You could also touch on cultural political dynamics, so reconciliation, elections, and child-parent relationships. You could also, as you're going through the orientation, you could also touch on any questions that they may have during that time. So this could be a very informal meeting that you have with the newcomers. It doesn't need to be something that is specifically set in stone or that is a very formal environment. It could be something that is entirely informal, which could also alleviate the stress of it. It could also make it a little bit more free when it comes to speaking, when it comes to sharing your ideas, when it comes to sharing the information that you have. So you may have this orientation at the beginning, but you also continue with regular check-ins throughout the sponsorship period, just to make sure that you're on top of things, that if anything comes up, you're able to at least address the issue right away. During these trainings, during these orientations, you could have a translator and interpreter if there is a language barrier, just to ensure that the communication is ongoing on both sides. There is a checklist. Here it is on our website. If you just have no idea of exactly what to include in that orientation, there is a checklist. You can go on there, type in all that information that you would like to also add on to it. We're going to also talk on culture adjustment, culture shock. This is also a big thing that happens post-arrival. Culture shock is just a period of disorientation when experiencing a new culture. It is completely normal. So everyone will experience culture shock in different degrees. So it doesn't mean that people are not resilient. It just means that there is just a shock that they would just need to get through before they're able to now start settling easily into the country, into the community that they're in. So to try and avoid as much culture shock, you could try to familiarize yourself with the refugees' cultural background. You could try familiarizing yourself with any ethno-specific service providing organizations, or just increase your own awareness of the culture, whether through counseling or any other services. So awareness culture can be seen as a collection of customs, beliefs, values, institutions. You could also be supportive of women experiencing isolation, to try to help them to create friendships outside the home. And one thing to also keep in mind, I think as sponsors, as much as we would like to help, we also need to accept that we cannot fix the situation. So you can just be supportive throughout the ups and downs. You can talk about their interest, maybe do leisure activities together, maybe try to get them involved in some sort of hobby that they may be interested in. That would also give them a little bit of a sense of community. The most important thing is just to keep open communication as much as possible throughout. So these are just some ideas of what you could do as a sponsor when you are noticing that the newcomer is experiencing culture shock. Part of your ethics considerations as you're going through expectations, as you're going through the sponsorship period, part of your ethics consideration should include a recognition of refugee rights. So refugees do have rights. One of them is the right to self-determination. So it's important to recognize that the refugees that you have sponsored have always had the right to self-determination. So their ability to exercise this right may have been restricted for a period of time, but they've always had the right and they exercise their right. So you'll need to inform the newcomers that they have their own right to make their own decisions if they would like to do so. You'll just provide them with the information that's needed and they can go ahead and make their own decisions. You'll inform the newcomers to their right of privacy. So when it comes to newcomers sharing any information with you as their sponsors is because they trust you. So you would not share personal information such as details of their refugee experience and medical information unless it is absolutely required. So this includes any information relating to trauma, any injury sustained as a result of torture or as a result of mistreatment. All of that information will be kept private. They also do have the right to equity. Stereotypes can be hurtful. So as a sponsor, you'll do your best to avoid assumptions or avoid stereotyping the newcomers, whether that is based on gender, whether it's based on age, ability, or religion. Try to establish appropriate boundaries in your personal relationships and just try to make the relationships as equitable as possible by also being aware of power dynamics. There could be a risk of abuse of power if there is a lack of equity between the sponsors and the newcomers. So as we mentioned, there could be a lack of equity and there could be a risk of abuse of power. It also touches on balancing the scale. So recognize your own limits. So when it comes to competence, try not to do everything yourself if you're not qualified. Go ahead and do the referral. Connect them to a settlement agency. They'll be able to assist, especially when it comes to trauma counseling. Provide the newcomers with full information. So when it comes to transparency, provide them with accurate information on their rights, on their services that are available to them. And you'll also assist them in having financial independence. So assist them in knowing how to pay their bills from the money that you are providing them and ensure that they're not put in a position where they might feel as if they are receiving charity. And finally, the last one here is concluding a sponsorship. Provide the sponsored person all the information that's needed for the end of the sponsorship period. So you'll need to ensure that they know, okay, the sponsorship period actually ends on this date. So as of this date, we're no longer responsible. However, you can still assist if you would like to do so. So you can also acknowledge the end of the sponsorship and prepare them also for the transition. And our last item here, post-arrival assurance activities. What exactly is this? Program assurance ensures that the PSR program itself is performing according to its objectives and requirements. So within the PSR program, it's ensuring that refugees are receiving the support, whether it's financially or settlement support, that they're receiving the support that they should from private sponsors based on requirements and regulations. So that is what post-arrival assurance activities is. The team that undertakes these activities is called the RSAT team. So that's the Resettlement Services Assurance Team. And it is just another branch of IRCC. So they're still under IRCC, it's just a different team that undertakes these activities. There's 3 different activities under this program. There is the reported cases, the reactive monitoring, and routine monitoring. And I'll just quickly go with this. Reported cases is where, let's say you're sponsoring someone during the 1 year. However, you're not providing them with the needed settlement support. So they may go to a settlement agency and request additional settlement support that should have been provided by a sponsor. And the settlement agency is aware of this, and they may report this to IRCC. Then IRCC may reach out to you to conduct the monitoring. So that is a reported case. So that means you were reported to IRCC. Reactive monitoring, so the second activity, is when the reports are quite often. So let's say there have been multiple reported concerns from different sponsorship group, then IRCC may reach out and request and do a monitoring on your group. And the last one is a routine monitoring. It's where it's done completely at random. completely at random. They may reach out to you for monitoring. So what exactly this means? So you may, during the sponsorship period, if you fall under any of these categories, the RSAT team could reach out to you and say, hey, you are sponsoring this person. They arrived on this date. Can you provide us with proof of financial support that you've been giving them? Or can you provide us with proof of settlement support? So that's where you would then respond to them and say, yes, here is a proof of all the financial support, or here's a proof of all the settlement support that you've been providing. So that is just what monitoring is. It's just whenever they reach out to you, requesting additional information or just requesting proof. There is a document that touches on what type of examples documents will be accepted. It also goes more into detail on all three of these activities, but it also touches on the timeline itself. So how much time do you have from the time that they reach out to you to the time you have to respond to them? And when it comes to these activities, if at any point in time they reach out to you, even if it's done at random, if you have any questions, post-arrival support, feel free to reach out to them. Here's their email. If you have any post-arrival questions or concerns, or if they reached out to you for a case review, send them an email, ask your questions. They'll be more than happy to assist you. They are typically giving you a timeline. So when they reach out to you, they'll give you a timeline. They'll say within 30 days or so. If you need more time, respond to them right away and let them know we need additional time. They'll be able to extend that time if needed. They will work with you. So when it comes to sponsorship records, we recommend keeping track of everything. In case if ISC reaches out to you for monitoring, keep track of everything. Keep track of all the services you've given. Keep track of any financial support. I strongly recommend avoiding cash. There is no way to prove cash. So strongly recommend avoiding cash, for example, maybe just do checks or e-transfers. At least you can keep copies of that. And these records, all the records that you're keeping, they'll help you to keep track of everything. They'll help you when you're communicating about your case with RSAT if you're selected for monitoring. And they'll also help you in ensuring that you're fulfilling your obligations as a sponsor. At any point in time, if you have any questions, consult the post-arrival requirements, reach out to any of the local trainers. They'll be more than happy to sit down with you, either set up an appointment with you or discuss the case over the phone with you. Or you can reach out to RSAT through the email that I shared with you. So at any point in time, once the newcomers are here or before even they arrive, if you have questions already, feel free to reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to assist you. And if you've never worked with a settlement agency and you're looking to get connected with one, we have a team that works specifically to connect settlement workers with sponsors. And they can also connect them with sponsored refugees. So at any point in time, feel free to reach out to us. If you don't know which settlement agency to connect with, you can reach out to our team. This is their email. They'll be able to connect you with any settlement support that you may need.